Have you ever had that sinking feeling that the people who should be on your side are the ones sharpening their knives? My name is Olivia Morgan. When I graduated from law school, my first act was moving my grandparents' $3 million estate into a trust. I just smiled and replied, "You really think I would let that happen?" Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If this resonates with you, please hit that like and subscribe button. What they were actually pursuing was a life free from responsibility, bouncing between get-rich-quick schemes that inevitably failed. The house had been in my grandfather's family for 3 generations, along with several other valuable properties and investments that made up their estate. Every morning, Grandma Martha would wake me up with the smell of fresh-baked muffins. "Rise and shine, little lawyer," she would call me, long before I ever considered law school. His patience was infinite as I tangled line after line. In the evenings, we would sit in the library, each with our own book, occasionally sharing passages we found interesting. From my grandparents, I learned the values that would shape my life: honesty, hard work, and responsibility. Grandpa always said, "Your word is your bond, Olivia. Break it, and you lose something you can never buy back." A woman must be able to stand on her own 2 feet, especially when others try to knock her down. My relationship with my biological parents and younger sister, Valerie, was complicated at best. They would visit maybe twice a year, usually around Christmas when gifts were expected, or randomly when they needed money. Each visit followed the same pattern: exaggerated affection, followed by casual questions about how Grandpa's investments were doing, culminating in a teary story about unexpected expenses and requests for loans that were never repaid. Dad had filed for bankruptcy twice before I turned 10. Mom had been involved in several questionable business ventures, selling everything from miracle diet pills to timeshares. They lived beyond their means, always chasing the next opportunity that would finally make them rich. Valerie, 7 years younger than me, grew up watching and learning from them. By her teens, she had mastered their techniques of manipulation and entitlement. Valerie was their baby, the child they could manage to parent because she demanded so little actual parenting. Dad began calling more frequently, asking pointed questions about their health, their will, their financial advisors. Mom would send links to retirement communities, suggesting the house was too much for them to manage. Each visit became more stressful, with whispered conversations ending abruptly when I entered rooms. Throughout my school years, I excelled academically, encouraged by my grandparents' unwavering support. When I was 16, I started working part-time at the local library to help with expenses. The helplessness and betrayal they experienced haunted me. I wanted to understand how to prevent such injustices, especially for vulnerable seniors. College and then law school were challenging as my grandparents' health began to decline. Grandpa developed heart problems that required multiple surgeries. Grandma was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. I attended a local university so I could live at home and help care for them, turning down scholarships to more prestigious schools farther away. During my final year of law school, I was taking classes during the day, studying at night, and helping with medical appointments and home care in between. My parents and Valerie were noticeably absent, despite receiving invitations months in advance. Mom had texted that morning with a vague excuse about car trouble. I had stopped expecting their presence at important moments in my life long ago, but their absence still stung. After the ceremony, we celebrated at Grandpa's favorite Italian restaurant. Grandma nodded enthusiastically, adding, "Smart as a whip, just like her grandfather." The greatest threat to elderly individuals' financial security rarely comes from strangers, Professor Winters told our class. 70% of elder financial abuse is perpetrated by family members or trusted caregivers. The sense of betrayal is often more devastating than the financial loss. Her words resonated deeply with me. I began researching protective measures, particularly irrevocable trusts, which could shield assets from predatory family members while ensuring the elderly person retained control during their lifetime. I started noticing the parallels between the case studies we discussed and my own family situation with increasing alarm. I brought copies of my grandparents' financial documents, which I had access to as I had been helping manage their bills. Nancy reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing more concerned. "Given the pattern of behavior you've described and these recent inquiries from your father about property values, there is cause for concern. An irrevocable trust would offer significant protection, but your grandparents would need to establish it voluntarily. Have you discussed this with them? That evening, I gathered my courage and broached the subject gently after dinner. What makes you think such a thing, dear? She asked finally. Reluctantly, I shared what I had observed. The increasing frequency of visits whenever their health took a downturn, the questions about their investments, the not-so-subtle hints about the house being too much work. Show me that trust information again, he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. The legal process was complex, requiring multiple meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, and the bank. Throughout the process, we maintained absolute secrecy. I was still living with them, working at a small law firm specializing in family law, and beginning to build my career while helping care for them. 6 months after we established the trust, Grandpa's health took a dramatic turn for the worse. What we had thought was simply fatigue related to his heart condition was diagnosed as advanced-stage pancreatic cancer. We were devastated. Suddenly, they began calling daily and visiting weekly, something unprecedented in all the years I had lived with my grandparents. Valerie even took a leave of absence from her job at a nail salon to help out, though her help mainly consisted of going through closets and cabinets, cataloging items of value when she thought no one was watching. One evening, I overheard a conversation between my parents in the garden. What about Olivia? Mom asked. She's always watching. And now she's a lawyer. The next morning, I checked in with Nancy Hoffman, confirming that all the trust documents were properly filed and unassailable. As Grandpa grew weaker, he seemed to sense the vultures circling. It's not just property, Olivia. It's the physical embodiment of our family history, our love, our sacrifices. Richard never understood that. He sees only dollar signs where I see memories. 3 days later, he slipped into a coma. He passed away peacefully the following morning, with Grandma and me at his bedside. A few close friends, neighbors, and former colleagues gathered to celebrate his life. Grandpa had been rich indeed by that measure. Her dementia had been progressing slowly, but grief accelerated her decline. Some days she recognized me instantly. Each time I had to gently remind her that he was gone, watching her heart break anew. I rearranged my work schedule to spend more time at home, taking cases I could largely work on remotely. These activities seemed to anchor her, providing islands of clarity in her increasingly foggy mental state. My parents called occasionally, always asking about Grandma's condition in a way that seemed more like checking on an investment than expressing genuine concern. Each time I provided minimal information, growing increasingly protective as Grandma became more vulnerable. Despite aggressive treatment, her weakened system couldn't fight the infection. Her final days were peaceful, at home in her own bed as she had wished. On her last night, she had a moment of complete lucidity. She looked at me and squeezed my hand. Elaine, she said, confusing me with my mother, I'm so proud of the woman you have become. So different from. Before I could correct her confusion, she had drifted back to sleep. The funeral was even smaller than Grandpa's. I buried my grandmother beside my grandfather in the small cemetery where generations of Morgans rested, taking comfort in knowing they were together again. I returned to an empty house that echoed with memories both comforting and painful. 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral, as I was still adjusting to the silence of the house and the enormity of my loss, the doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. When I opened the door, I found my parents and Valerie standing there, somber expressions carefully arranged on their faces. We are so sorry about Mom. We came as soon as we could clear our schedules. Valerie, 20 years old but dressed like a teenager, gave me a quick side hug. This house is even bigger than I remembered, she commented, not bothering to hide her assessment of its value. I invited them in with surface politeness, offering coffee and the pastries I had bought the day before. As we sat in the living room, the conversation followed a script I could have written in advance, beginning with cursory questions about Grandma's final days and quickly pivoting to matters of inheritance. I assume there is a will that needs to be probated. Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a sympathetic tone. You must be so lonely in this big house all by yourself. It's a lot for one person to maintain. Well, of course you do, sweetie, Mom said with a patronizing smile. But realistically, a young woman like you should be in a modern apartment downtown, close to other young professionals. Your father and I have been thinking, we could help you sell this place and find something more suitable. Dad nodded enthusiastically. Property values in this neighborhood are at an all-time high. It would be smart to sell now before the market shifts. They stayed for 3 days, during which I caught my mother going through Grandma's jewelry box when she thought I was on a work call, my father measuring rooms and taking photos for memories, and Valerie trying to pry information from Margaret about bank accounts and safety deposit boxes. On the second evening, I stepped onto the back porch for some air and overheard my father on his phone, speaking with someone about real estate values. The comps show at least $3.2 million in this market, he was saying. Maybe more with some updates. We just need to move quickly once we have control. The next morning, I confronted them gently over breakfast. Dad flushed red but quickly recovered. Just trying to help you sort things out, honey. You have enough on your plate with your new career and all this grief. Mom nodded vigorously. We are just concerned about you, darling. Such responsibility for someone so young. I simply nodded and said I appreciated their concern but had everything under control. She advised me to be vigilant but assured me the trust was secure. For several weeks I heard nothing from them. I began to hope they had accepted the situation and moved on. I was deep in a new case at work, and finally beginning to establish a routine that didn't revolve around caregiving when they reappeared without warning. All three walked up the front path as I was leaving for work, their expressions triumphant. Good morning, Olivia, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We also have papers showing the house has been signed over to Dad, Valerie added gleefully. I looked at their smug faces, at the folder of what I was certain were fraudulent documents, and felt a strange calm settle over me. This is happening whether you like it or not. Friday, Olivia. Be out by noon. Dad's face darkened. Don't threaten me, young lady. You're not the only one who knows about the law. With that parting shot, they left, confident in their victory. Bring me those documents if you can get copies, he said. This sounds like textbook forgery. I gathered all the trust documents, contacted the bank and security company, and assembled a small team of legal professionals who were willing to help. On Thursday evening, I sat on the porch swing, Grandpa's favorite spot, and felt his presence beside me. I will not let them take your legacy, I promised the evening air. Not one piece of it. The moment my family left with their threats and fraudulent documents, I sprang into action. My legal training kicked in, along with the protective instincts my grandparents had nurtured. It was about honoring my promise to protect my grandparents' legacy and standing up to years of manipulation and entitlement. First, I called Jake Thompson, the best litigator at my firm and a specialist in fraud cases. Jake arrived within the hour, along with his paralegal. I laid out everything: the trust documents, my grandparents' medical records showing they were competent when signing, the journal I had kept documenting my parents' suspicious behavior, and my recollection of the fraudulent claims they had just made. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception. But we need to see those documents to be certain. The trust is ironclad, Olivia. But we should file for an emergency injunction to prevent any recording of fraudulent deeds or transfers. I'll draft it tonight and file first thing tomorrow. With my legal team mobilizing, I turned to practical security measures. I called a locksmith who arrived that afternoon to change every lock in the house. By evening, the house was secure against unauthorized entry. The bank manager, who had known my grandparents for decades, was appalled at my situation and personally placed alerts on everything connected to the estate. That evening, as I was reviewing everything, my phone began ringing with calls from my parents and Valerie. The messages started politely, with Dad suggesting we talk things through like adults, but quickly devolved into threats. You have no idea who you're messing with, the final voicemail from my father growled. Their claim about a prior will taking precedence over the trust is completely without merit, she confirmed. What about the documents they claim to have? I asked. The supposed earlier will and property transfer? If they attempt to file those anywhere, we will immediately challenge them as fraudulent, Sophia explained. Through careful research and some contacts from law school, I documented my father's 2 bankruptcies, a tax lien, and a small claims judgment against my mother for a failed business venture where she had taken investments but never delivered products. By Thursday afternoon, my family's desperation was showing. Valerie posted a rambling message on social media, claiming I had manipulated our sick grandparents and stolen the family legacy. She tagged extended family members and old neighbors, trying to rally public opinion against me. My colleagues were shocked but supportive. Later that day, I learned from a concerned neighbor that my father had been going door to door on my street, telling people I was mentally unstable, and trying to gather community support for their takeover of the property. As Friday approached, I prepared for all contingencies. Jake would be at the house with me, along with Nancy and a notary public to witness any interactions. But underneath the anxiety was a bedrock of certainty. I was doing exactly what my grandparents would have wanted, protecting the home they had lovingly maintained for generations against those who saw it only as a payday. I woke early after a restless night, showered, and dressed carefully in a professional navy suit, automatically reaching for the pearl earrings Grandma had given me for my law school graduation. Nancy came next with the notary public, a solemn woman named Patricia who had witnessed hundreds of property disputes. Just in case they try to go directly to the registry of deeds, she explained. I would meet my family on the front porch, the symbolic threshold they sought to cross. At precisely 11:45, 15 minutes before their self-imposed deadline for my eviction, a black SUV pulled up at the curb. Several neighbors paused their gardening to watch the spectacle unfold. My father emerged first from the SUV, dressed in what he probably thought was impressive business attire, a slightly too tight suit with flashy cufflinks. My mother followed, her face set in grim determination, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes. Valerie bounced out last, practically skipping with anticipation, phone already in hand, as if ready to document her victory. I stood up slowly from the porch swing, the folder in my hand, and waited. Let them come to me on my territory, the home my grandparents had entrusted to my care. Several neighbors had drifted closer, sensing drama and perhaps concern for my welfare. We brought a truck to help with your things, my mother added in a falsely sweet voice designed to present an image of familial concern to the watching neighbors. We know this must be difficult. You mean your forged documents? I asked calmly. The ones that supposedly override an irrevocable trust established over a year ago, when both my grandparents were alive and legally competent? My mother's smile faltered. My father's face darkened as he climbed the first 2 steps. Now you listen here. This house belongs to me. My parents wanted me to have it. Whatever you tricked them into signing when they were sick doesn't change that. The sight of 5 adults, clearly professional and prepared, brought my father up short. Mr. Morgan, Jake said pleasantly. I'm Jake Thompson, attorney for the Morgan Family Trust. I believe you were just about to accuse your daughter of fraud and undue influence. Please continue. We are recording for the court. My mother grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. He waved the folder again but made no move to open it. Sophia stepped forward, her professional demeanor unruffled. As counsel for the estate, I must inform you that we have obtained an emergency injunction preventing any recording of fraudulent property transfers related to this estate. Additionally, I should warn you that presenting forged documents to a financial institution or government office is a felony in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Grandma and Grandpa established the Morgan Family Trust to protect their assets and legacy. All properties and investments are held by the trust, which I manage as the designated trustee. This was their choice, made freely while they were alive and well. Any documents you have claiming otherwise are fraudulent. My father's frustration boiled over. This is not over, Olivia. I am your father. That counts for something legally. I will fight this to the Supreme Court if necessary. I will make sure everyone knows how you manipulated 2 elderly people. Your reputation will be ruined. Jake stepped forward again. Mr. Morgan, are you threatening to file frivolous lawsuits and engage in defamation? Because that would constitute harassment and possibly extortion. Should I add that to the record? The moving truck driver approached cautiously. Sir, we're on the clock here. Are we moving anything or not? My father ignored him, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. After everything we have done for you. I couldn't help the short, incredulous laugh that escaped me. Everything you have done for me? You abandoned me when I was 5 years old. Grandma and Grandpa raised me, loved me, taught me everything important about life and family. You showed up only when you needed money or thought there was something to gain. I played the recording I had made of their conversation in the garden during Grandpa's final days, their voices clear as they plotted to take advantage of Grandma's confusion and cut me out entirely. My father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Actually, Nancy interjected, Massachusetts law permits recording if the person recording is a party to the conversation or has consent from a party. Olivia was present and consented to her own recording. Perfectly legal. This is not over, he hissed, backing down the steps. Family should not treat family this way. The moving truck pulled away, its mission unfulfilled. Margaret squeezed my shoulder. Your grandparents would be so proud, she said softly. So very proud. In the aftermath, life slowly found a new rhythm. The legal dust settled, the trust my grandparents so wisely created holding firm against any challenge. My parents and sister vanished from my life, their silence a strange, hollow sort of peace. The house, once a battleground, became a sanctuary again. I filled its quiet rooms not just with memories but with new life. We filled the old Victorian with laughter, the smell of home-cooked meals, and the warmth of genuine affection. He was bright, dedicated, and full of stories about how the scholarship had made his dream of becoming an elder law advocate possible. As we sat on the porch swing sipping cider, he told me about the families he hoped to help. I realized then that my grandparents' legacy wasn't just in the house or the money. It felt full, brimming with the promise of a future they had secured for me, a future I was now paying forward. Have you ever had to protect yourself, or someone you love from family members who showed their true colors when money was involved? Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these difficult situations can be incredibly healing. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for what is right, even against family, is sometimes the most loving choice we can make.